I got an open mind, like a golden child. You try to go for points, I try to go for style. I do my city pride, I try to keep it wild. Ichiban, wicked one, Okinawa loud. I drink Guinnesses and go to dinner with my nemesis. Have a couple laughs while they plot how to finish this. Interested on how to get up on the wizard list. Senseless, you sense I'm the sensei. Apprentices, I'm the salt up in the cut. Who you trying to play but us? Like a DJ turning stuff. Who you trying to fool? We all know that shit's unplugged, yeah.
Catch me in the mood, I ain't too cool for wrecking shit. Stoners on the loose, call that shit a hippie flip. We just getting going, and this shit's just my starter kit. I'm on a good one, real fucking good one. I'm feeling brand new, yeah I'm talking redone. You're talking about me, talking about the real one. I'm out with Jenny, tossing rocks at the building. Holly Stone, all that shit. So fly, call me pilot. MCs get a tourniquet, body bag that murder Vic. This evidence is evident. We stampeding elephants, we crash shot. I'm king bitch, I bitches off like little bitch.
Serving is more than a tradition. It's a call, and you've answered it. That's why we're proud to extend exclusive offers to military personnel, active or retired. And Chevrolet, together let's drive.
So anyway, first of all I say that because it's something which has been much torturing my mind really, and saddening me that this should be so. At the same time, that's as it is that this hatred is back, this desire to blame the Jews for everything is back, and some people are suffering from it and being demented by it very severely. I just had one other thing on that though, which is that we get back to something which is more to do with the general picture, which is, and it gets back to this thing of the, as it were, the understandable feeling on the part of the young right and their attitudes towards Israel and the Jews, which is the sense that, well, to quote the character in Mikhail Welbeck's submission, I don't have an Israel. That, if you remember, is what the Jewish student who's having an affair with the professor until typical Welbeckian setup. The professor is not Jewish. The student comes to him and she says, as France is getting worse and worse, says, I'm going to make Aliyah, I'm going to move to Israel. It's got too bad here for Jews. And her lover, professor, says, I don't have an Israel. Now, and I think, just very quickly, I think that a lot of young figures on the right that I see coming up, some of whom are very, very brilliant and smart, some of whom are troll-like troglodytes of the kind that I have no time for at all. But
I won't ask you which is which.
they'll know. They'll know.
Douglas Murray exposes the catastrophic betrayal nobody wants to admit. British politicians defend a culture they've never studied, while the ideology attacking it has done its homework. The generation that fought Nazis is gone. And right on schedule, the sewers reopened. Tom Stoppard survived Hitler and died watching it return. Britain internalised a foreign death sentence and called it tolerance. This isn't a warning anymore, it's happening.
I tell you what I really object to in this is the sheer ignorance of the people talking to me about this, talking at me, I should say, about this. When I hear a minister, and this can go across, again, political parties, when I hear them talking about Britain, I just think, tell me your favourite British poets. Recite one to me. Tell me your favourite Shakespeare play. When did you last go to the theatre? Tell me about the great cathedrals of England. Which is your top three favourites? Tell me which composers resonate most with you. Why do you think Finzi breaks the English heart so much when you listen to him? I don't think almost any parliamentarian would know what I'm talking about.
Completely uncultivated. So they're totally unqualified to be able to...
They're totally unqualified. It would be like me landing, as I say, landing in Myanmar and knowing nothing about the culture.
Well, in a sense,
and talking about the culture.
They're foreigners in their own country. And I wonder whether actually this is the reason why...
And by the way, sorry, it was stressed. That's not just sort of people of... We're not talking only about people of immigrant background.
No, I mean...
Talking about...
Yeah, British born, people whose ancestry have been here since the Normans or something,
yes.
but are so alienated from their own culture.
Well, they've alienated themselves from it, the fools.
And I wonder whether, part of that's obviously the increasingly poor education system, but I wonder whether actually this is the reason why the threat of Islamism has been so misunderstood and why we have only been able to talk about it in the abstract rather than in the particular and addressing it as for what it is, because Islamism is, in any country that it's in, is intending to subvert that particular culture.
These are people who cannot name a Shakespeare play, but claim to protect British culture. How do you defend something you have never bothered to learn? You are sending someone who has never heard Elgar, never read Keats, to fight an ideology that understands your civilization better than your own parliament does. Islamism has done its homework. Your politicians genuinely have not. And that is terrifying.
If you try to deal with it in the abstract, you're not understanding the nature of the threat.
No, I mean, like when Iranians didn't understand the nature of the Ayatollah's threat in 1979. What a mistake that was to underestimate what Khomeini really intended. When it happens in our own countries, but I come back to this thing. Of all of the ways you can deal with that, my preference always was to be highly specific on identifying the threat, zapping the threat, but at the same time keeping on going and cherishing what is ours. And instead, because people don't listen, everything was pushed down like this, and everything became shallow and so wide as to be useless.
What's the difference between good and bad tenants? Well, it's this versus this. It's this versus this. Yeah, and often, it's whether the landlord and property managers have accurate criminal, credit, and eviction reports. So, where can you get trustworthy reports quickly before applicants slip away? At RentTech Direct. In under 60 seconds, with no setup fee, you can verify applicants' eviction and criminal records. And with a quick application to verify your profession, you can see the applicant's credit report and FICO score. So that means you don't have to bother your applicant with filling out anything other than your standard rental application. Other options provide even more granular details. All this comes at little or no expense to you, since tenants pay for screenings with their application fees. If you already use our powerful property management software, you can save time and improve accuracy by using the rental application data for ordering background reports. Then automatically populate all this data into your tenant database. Hey, look, you've invested so much into your rental properties, so get the world's best and most reliable screening data to protect them. Sign up here and visit renttechdirect.com/blog for more from the country's leading applicant screening service.
Related to this, or at least I think it's related to this, why do you think that the mainstream media have been so silent on what is happening in Iran? I saw a fantastic tweet the other day that explained it, as I was wondering, why is it that they're being so silent? And this woman explained that it's because the liberal metropolitan elite types in the media cannot conceptualize that people could possibly be revolting against Islam. That this is just something that is so anathema to them, so outside of their frame of
Well, they're not
understanding.
revolting against Islam, they're revolting against Khomeinism. Most people in Iran will remain Muslim after a revolution as they were before.
The Iranians in 1979 thought Khomeini was manageable. And how did that work out? A generation of women tortured, executed, oppressed. And your media cannot cover Iranians risking their lives in the streets because it breaks their little worldview. Not revolting against Islam, revolting against a regime that weaponized it. Your journalists know this, but will not say it. That is not ignorance. That is cowardice with a press pass.
But the thing for them, is the curse of Iran since '79 has been Khomeinism. I think that many people in the West have no concept of what I mean when I'm describing Khomeinism. I mean, we all had a glimpse of it from 1989 with the Ayatollah's fatwa on the British novelist Salman Rushdie for writing the Satanic Verses. That should have been a pretty early lesson, which again, we sort of we internalized the fatwa instead of just resisting it. We sort of accepted it. But I think that again, I mean, if we're so ignorant about ourselves as a country, how could we possibly understand a form of government which, for instance, in Khomeini's own, I mean, if you read the Blue Book of Khomeini, which is quite hard to get, but if you read it as I have, this is properly insane, apocalyptic stuff. I mean, the sort of, a woman who's going to be executed can be raped beforehand in order that she doesn't go to heaven. I mean, can we imagine? Can our women's minister even imagine that there is a society on earth where that happens? Where rape is endorsed by the government as a form of moral correction before execution. It's beyond the. Do they understand that Khomeini thought very deeply, for instance, about what you should do? And I'm not saying this to laugh at Muslims. I'm saying it's to laugh at Khomeini, but that Khomeini thought very deeply about what happens if you have carnal relations with a goat. Do you know this?
Do you know
Am I
what?
allowed to say this on YouTube? I don't know. We'll see where we go.
Come on, get us demonetised,
Okay.
Douglas.
Okay, here we go.
We internalised the fatwa. A foreign government sentenced a British novelist to death, and Britain just adjusted. That was the moment to draw the line, and we drew a white flag instead. Does your women's minister even know that Khomeini's government sanctioned rape before execution as official policy? She should be screaming about it daily. He wrote a detailed rule book for this horror, and we never even opened it.
Khomeini, among other things, thinks about what you should do if the man ejaculates inside the goat that he owns. should he also be allowed to eat it afterwards? And the answer is no. You should,
not allow.
should gift it to a neighbouring village.
Take the wheel of a new 2026 Sportage Hybrid and set out on your next adventure from Charlie's Kia. Enjoy impressive range and a standard 12.3-inch curved touchscreen display with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Click now to view our inventory during the summer sticker sales event.
At Sophia Learning, we believe in making education more accessible and affordable for everyone. That's why we offer all...
So the act of...
What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, everyone knows you can't eat a goat, you fucked. I mean, we all know that. Come on, Emma. I don't know what happens in your village, but...
What's wrong with the neighbouring village? What do they do to deserve it?
No, but I always wondered if I was an nice Iranian family sitting in my my village just outside, Tehran, and a neighbour comes over and I don't know. The neighbour said, "Hey, I
accept to go from the neighbour's village."
Exactly. He goes, "Look, I got Billy, the goat here. I just wondered if you like him. You know what that son of a dog's been up to." But can you imagine that this is the sort of thing that Khomeini was deeply, deeply interested in thinking about? Never mind once you get to the violence and the demand that people give up their lives for hate. And again, by the way, there's a brilliant passage in the Satanic Verses of Salman Rushdie about the Ayatollah, which I wish people read more, which is actually lifted from an interview. I assume that, he never said this, but assume it's lifted from the great Oriana Fallaci's interview with Khomeini, about the only Western journalist who got an in-depth interview with Khomeini in 1979. She says at one point in the interview, brilliant interview that she was, he describes all his people dying for the revolution and says they're dying for love. Fallaci says it is hate, Ayatollah, it is hate.
This man ruled a country of millions, and his deepest intellectual concern was goat logistics. That is not religion. That is a man with too much time and no shame. And Fallaci saw it immediately. She sat across from Khomeini and told the world it was hate driving those deaths, not love. Your media ignored her then, and they are still ignoring her now. Nothing has changed except the body count.
And in the Satanic Verses of Salman Rushdie, there's legions of young Iranians walking into the jaws of the massive Ayatollah's mouth as it chomps down on them. There's no understanding of this.
I think we've come to accept from the left. I mean, given the fact that the left actually helped the Islamists take over in Iran, and ironically, when the left do come out effectively in support of the Ayatollahs, they do so forgetting that all of their comrades were then very quickly slaughtered.
I don't know if they forget that. The problem with the Iranian diaspora, as I understand, the problem was that the left.
Well, I mean the Western left.
Well, yes. What often happens, what happens internally is similar to what happened in Austria in '38. Is that a political side is divided. In the case of Iran, the left was divided: trade unionists, Marxists, anti-monarchists, leftists, and so on. And when you have sides that are that divided, you can get somebody coming through. The example I give of '38 is that the right in Austria was divided because there were conservatives who were in favour of the return of the Habsburgs and conservatives who were not in favour of the return of the Habsburgs, and then another Austrian comes through the middle.
But I wonder, like I say, I think I have come to expect the left to side with the West's enemies, but actually we're seeing more now people on the right who would sooner side with Hamas or Hezbollah or the Ayatollahs over Israel, and they actually see that as being patriotic. They see, in effect, siding with the West's enemies as the patriotic option.
Well, let me say one thing for addressing that, which is that I suspect I've been following this corner a lot. I've been relatively silent on this question recently because I've been writing, but
The left helped put Khomeini in power and then looked genuinely surprised when he slaughtered their own comrades. That is not political error. That is self-inflicted stupidity with a serious body count. And now, people on the right call siding with Hamas patriotic, against your own civilization. At least the left was deluded. What is the right's actual excuse?
I think what I see bubbling up in some young people really on the right is a feeling that too much emphasis and weight is put on Israel. I'm giving the kindest interpretation before I go to the unkindest. The kindest interpretation is there's an awful lot of weight put on Israel. Why do we have to be so supportive is what they're thinking. Now my answer to that is obvious, in the same way that, you obviously support the countries that are most like you. I don't have a problem, I never did have a problem that between government in Jerusalem of Israel and Israeli society and the government even of Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, I didn't have a problem deciding which I was more in favor of, more kin to. But I think some people, young people on the right, have started to this isn't an attack on all of them. I'm about to attack some of them. But I think there's a sort of, why is this such a big thing? And some of them, by natural contrarian instinct, start to kick against that or resent it or something like that. And I understand that as an impulse, but impulse isn't enough. You also have to have principles and morals about these things. And I think that the thing that has come sidecar with that movement has been something which I have to say has shocked me. I wouldn't say shock, it's upset me actually, that there was a genuine cordon sanitaire.
Serving is more than a tradition. It's a call, and you've answered it. That's why we're proud to extend exclusive offers to military personnel active or retired. And Chevrolet, together let's drive.
In winter, you definitely get more dehydrated than you do in summertime. It's easy to just not drink when you're cold. When you're on these backcountry missions, you can't crash. We may be out there for 20 hours, possibly, trying to get to someone. Our bodies need to be prepared for that. Element tastes amazing, and it's much easier to stay hydrated when it tastes good. Being prepared and fit really makes the success of a mission.
Being contrarian about Israel is not a political position. It is a teenage tantrum dressed up as analysis. You do not get to pick your principles only when convenient. Israel is a functioning democracy, surrounded by governments that would execute you for your lifestyle, and you are sitting here treating support for it like an embarrassment. Contrarianism without morality is just stupidity with an audience.
I've always been against cordon sanitaires being put in the wrong place. As I say,
But they have their uses.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I've been against cordon sanitaires being put in such a place that, people who worry about migration should be beyond the pale, or I don't know anyone who is opposed on certain moral questions. I don't like the cordon sanitaire keeping out legitimate opinion, legitimate questions. Now you might say, what is legitimate, what is illegitimate? Well, the illegitimate thing would be when you start to blame everything on the Jews. And I've sort of said everything I have to say about that in my most recent book on democracies and death cults, which is about the last 2.5 years of war. But something that is happening is a generational swing. My general feeling is that some of the stuff we see particularly from people on the American real far right, and some erstwhile friends of mine, which obviously adds to the pain that one feels about it is that they're doing things which they wouldn't have dared to do even 10 years ago. And I think it's a generational swing because the generation that went through the war, survivors of the Holocaust, and people who fought against Nazism have almost all died out. And with it, to steal Camus' phrase, with that moment the rats start to come out of the sewers again. I had a set of losses of friends before Christmas between Peter and also a friend David Price Jones, a wonderful writer, and Tom Stoppard died, and
the last generation that actually fought Nazis is gone. And right on schedule, the sewers are opening up. That is not a coincidence, that is a warning. And these are not fringe strangers doing it, these are people Douglas called friends. That is what makes it genuinely painful, rather than just politically frustrating. Blaming Jews for everything is not an edgy opinion worth debating. It is the oldest failure in Western history, and we keep failing it.
For some reason, all this hit me rather acutely. Among other reasons, because David and Tom were among my last friends who had themselves had to flee the monster of Hitler, and David was taken with his family away from Hungary before the Nazis invaded, and then as a boy was rushed out of Paris one morning when the Germans were coming in. Got to Spain and then North Africa. Tom Stoppard, of course, his family managed to get out Czechoslovakia just before Hitler came in. These were people who the 20th century were glanced against pretty significantly. And I sort of thought, well, yeah, that's the last of the kids who missed the great catastrophe by a hair's breadth. And I suppose I said, but the last time I saw Tom Stoppard was about a year ago, and I remember he said to me, it's back, isn't it? It's back. And I said, what? He said, the anti-Semitism is back. And he said, he had not spent much of his life thinking about this question. He thought it was a matter for the past. And he said, I actually have Jewish friends who are talking about leaving, getting out.
I know people who have just recently gone to Israel because of this exact issue.
And then you get, so anyway, first of all I say that because it's something which has been much torturing my mind really, and saddening me that this should be so. At the same time, that's as it is that this hatred is back, this desire to blame the Jews for everything is back, and some people are suffering from it and being demented by it very severely.
Tom Stoppard spent his entire life assuming anti-Semitism was a closed chapter and died watching it reopen. His family ran from Hitler by days, and now Jewish people in Britain are quietly packing bags again. Douglas is not being dramatic, he is being precise. When the last people who physically survived that era are telling you it is back, you do not debate it. You listen or you repeat it.
I just had one other thing on that though, which is that we get back to something which is more to do with the general picture, which is, and it gets back to this thing of the, as it were, the understandable feeling on the part of the young right and their attitudes towards Israel and the Jews, which is the sense that, to quote the character in Mikhail Welbeck's submission, I don't have an Israel. That, if you remember, is what the Jewish student who's having an affair with the professor until typical Welbeckian setup. The professor is not Jewish. The student comes to him and she says, as France is getting worse and worse, says, I'm going to make Aliyah, I'm going to move to Israel. It's got too bad here for Jews. And her lover, professor, says, I don't have an Israel. Now, and I think, just very quickly, I think that a lot of young figures on the right that I see coming up, some of whom are very, very brilliant and smart, some of whom are troll-like troglodytes of a kind that I have no time for at all. But
I won't ask you which is which.
they'll know.
So the young right watches Jews have a homeland to flee to and feels cheated that nobody built them one. Noted, but your ancestors ran Europe for 1,000 years. What did they build for you? The Jews built Israel after being nearly wiped out. You are sitting on generational power and calling yourself homeless. That is not grievance. That is laziness dressed up as ideology. So, any thoughts on what Douglas Murray just discussed? Share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of our future debates.
In the Middle East, there are moments when history is not written in conference rooms, but in bunkers, in sea straits, and on a war table ready to explode at any second. Trump sets a red line for Iran. The deal will be big and meaningful, or there will be no deal. This is according to Trump. The tension with Iran has not disappeared. It has simply moved from the battlefield to the negotiating table. It is possible that in another 24 hours, we will be talking about an agreement, and it is possible that we will be talking about renewed attacks. What is certain is that the war is still not over. Iran makes it clear the deal with the United States is still far away. Tehran announced that progress has been made on a large part of the issues with Washington, but emphasized that an agreement is not close. At the same time, oil prices dropped following the renewed optimism. Iran first wants guarantees, frozen money to be returned, and the removal of sanctions. The United States first wants enriched uranium, the nuclear issue, and supervision. And Trump, he's cooling the enthusiasm and telling his representatives do not rush into a deal. Here in Israel, we are looking at this with a great concern. Will the agreement truly stop the nuclear program, the missiles, and the proxies? Or will it only give Iran 60 days to breathe, organize, and rearm? So are the United States and Iran really getting closer to understanding that could end this regional war? The issues of the nuclear program, the Strait of Hormuz, the frozen funds, Lebanon, these are all still issues that are not agreed yet. So what do we know about the emerging agreement? We will get into all the details very soon, but right now the question is this. Are we on the way to a smart agreement that weakens Iran, or to a ceasefire that saves it at the last moment? I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground, and we bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel, and also the whole truth about what is happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And today is May 25th, and we will already bring you everything you need to know about this region. Because until a few days ago, almost everyone was getting that the war was about to return. Everyone was betting on that. In Israel, the military was on a high alert. And across the entire region, there was a feeling that the next round was already just around the corner. And then suddenly, instead of an attack, reports arrive about the United States and Iran getting closer. But in the Middle East, when everyone suddenly starts talking about an agreement, we need to ask, what's really behind it? One explanation is the calendar. Trump probably did not want to open a major attack during the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, Muslim high holiday, when more than 1.5 million Muslims are in Saudi Arabia. According to the reports, Saudi Arabia demanded that the war not be renewed during this time, in order not to leave pilgrims stuck inside the kingdom during a regional time of fire. In other words, it is possible that part of that, what looks like a diplomatic breakthrough, is also an attempt to buy time, calm the ground, and avoid blowing up the region at its most sensitive moment. That is why it is important to remember that behind the scenes, the American military is still ready to launch an attack at any moment. And at the same time, behind the scenes, an accelerated mediation effort was on its way. A Pakistani delegation led by the Chief of Staff Asim Munir arrived in Tehran, and for the first time since the beginning of the war, an official Qatari delegation also entered the picture. Iran defines Qatar as an assistant and not as a mediator, but its involvement itself is very important because Qatar can be part of the discussion about the frozen Iranian funds and perhaps serve as a bridge between the Iranian demands and the American pressure. And this is the important point. Until now, Iran wanted to separate two issues, the Strait of Hormuz on one side and the nuclear issue on the other. First, from its point of view, the war needs to stop. Guarantees need to be received. Frozen funds need to be released. Sanctions need to be removed. And only afterwards should they talk about the nuclear issue. The United States wanted exactly the opposite. First the nuclear issue, first the enriched uranium, first a ban on the enrichment on Iranian soil, and only afterwards the opening of Hormuz, and also economic relief. So if the reports are true, the breakthrough is not necessarily a major peace agreement, but an agreement to talk about both things at the same time. This is what is called a phased agreement, extending the ceasefire for an extra 60 days, gradually opening the Strait of Hormuz, discussing economic relief, and at the same time continuing talks on the nuclear issue. And that is exactly what worries us in Israel, because if the agreement only lowers the price of oil, opens up Hormuz and gives Iran economic oxygen, but does not dismantle the nuclear program, does not limit the ballistic.
So, Senator, with respect, I can't see Tallarico beating you or the Attorney General with words like that.
I gotta grab the butt.
Well, the problem
I that might help.
that Ken Paxton will be on defense the whole
read a
time
different
between
one.
now and November if he were is the nominee.
No, I'm gonna grab that one.
Millions of dollars to try to save them, and it's likely not to be successful because the mainstream media loves Tallarico.
It is. It's really nice. Well, I mean, we're right in the center of town. You have a military base, a police station, a fire station, and a courthouse all within a mile, less than a mile. Yeah, I'd say it's been being watched pretty carefully. In that respect.
I think I can help, and that's the reason I decided to run. I appreciate you doing the facts and only got 10 seconds left.
Yeah.
If you're not successful,
That's really nice though. It's warming up fast.
Senator, thank you so much for your service.
Now we're gonna do some reading. We'll have to set it up just right over here so it's part in the sun and part in the shade so this thing doesn't overheat. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. How's that? I just don't want the lens in the direct sunlight because this thing overheats really easy. It's an old device. I know. I gotta get different shoes. These are the shoes or slippers I used to come out here with because the roof is really black.
it gets black stuff on the bottom of them, so I take them off directly at the door. If I use my regular sandals or slippers, and I have to wash the bottoms every time because it gets the black stuff on it. Yeah, it's nice. We're going to read Early Days in America. Yeah, the one that we have been reading. This is section 5, page 35. Oh, yeah, I see. 1 second. How's that? Okay. Alright, page 35, section 5. Unfortunately, many colonial writers were not interested in recording the multitude of details of everyday life that are necessary for an adequate picture of the culture of the pioneer American communities. But there are, nevertheless, a goodly number who give some attention to such matters. It is clear enough that life in the different English colonies, though alike in some of its fundamental pioneer characteristics, and for a long time in its essential English spirit, showed a great deal of variety. The basis of the Virginia culture came soon to be plantation life, while at the other extreme of colonial culture in many ways was that of New England, founded upon the town. One May read pleasantly in Colonel Henry Norwood's narrative of that mid-17th century Virginia, which was largely a country of plantations. After Norwood had made his way out of the wilderness, where he had stuffed remarkable privations, he journeyed not from town to town, but from plantation to plantation, enjoying the free hospitality of the planters and living upon the fat of the land. Yes, cheers. We're having a black coffee. Well, it's not too hot. It's warm. And it is a warm morning here, yes. It's supposed to be 80 degrees today. I don't mind a warm drink on a warm day. Sometimes your body temperature actually, it signals stuff to cool off when you drink something warm. The theory holds strong. Internally speaking, I mean, on the surface level, you're going to feel that hot sun beating down, and you're going to say I'm crazy probably all day long. But scientifically, no, if you drink something slightly warm, internally the core starts to cool down internally. I don't know, it's like a body's natural signaling mechanism or something. Yeah, so on a cold day, if you're cold and you drink a cold drink, it does the opposite. It will signal the core to warm up. But I also like to have a nice warm drink on a cold day and a nice cool drink on a hot day. It depends on the activity. I'm just kind of sitting here reading now. There's a light breeze. Yes, thank you. Yeah, there are so many people over the years who educate themselves. And I myself, I've been wrong about so many things. I remember when I was first really learning about the vaccines and why my system was more susceptible to having children with neurological delays because of previous trauma or cell damage and bacterial overloads and a whole host of things, and learning about that was quite incredible, really. There were so many things that shocked me every single day, and it still does. I'm still in amazement at a lot of the mental and physical capabilities that I managed to have retained, stumbled upon, produced. Yeah, on the real though, it is quite incredible thinking about now and then and then and now. Only yesterday. Sometimes revelations and epiphanies, and it makes me laugh constantly too, because there's always things, just learning about the meaning of a word sometimes, or the history, I'll laugh about it for quite some time. I have a whole Rolodex of things that tickle me, you know? And I can access it really at any moment. And it, depending on time and space, you know, whether I'm in an ice box or on a warm beach or in a library, at work. Work might be enjoyable, might not be. I mean, anything you do, from chewing a piece of gum to having your coffee or a meal, is more or less enjoyable depending on time, space, environment, feng shui. Right, so we learn to not attach to something as though like a sound or a person or something just makes you sick. Right, to kind of shed the self of that. Right, because you're constantly, maybe not you, but some people have to put themselves into environments that make them uncomfortable or disgust them, whether it's a state of mind or a carpet. Right, and to be able to not let that impede too much upon your mental and physical health, you still have to eat. Okay, you just wait till later. I know, and some people accept that they're always in the muck. So some have to come to that acceptance. Some don't. Some move on. They move away from it. Right. For others, it's their job. They work with Child Protective Services or whatever it is, and they have to endure such cases or situations, and it can be mentally draining. And a lot of people, that's why we have a whole host of networks and peacemakers and mediators. It's not to kumbaya everything, just to be present, listen, mirror, right? Be angry with them. Or not. Whatever it is. Right, you know, when we sometimes get people that have been traumatized, whether it be in the workplace or their home, we get police officers, state workers, citizens. Right, even yourself personally, if you find something absolutely horrible and traumatizing and oh my God, it was awful and people were screaming, whatever it is, you know, you don't say to them, yeah, well, that's life, it happens, suck it up. Right? I mean, you can say that. Maybe you do, but I wouldn't. I don't think that's appropriate at all. No, I mean, you say, oh my, whatever it is, whether it's a hangnail issue or something that you wouldn't find traumatizing at all, big deal. So what? I deal with that all the time. Suck it up. Yeah, no, whatever this person is feeling upset about, whether it's a hangnail, I don't care if it was lint on their recliner. They don't like lint on their recliner, and it really upset them. And it wasn't the lint itself, it was that,
you know, people disrespected it too when they mentioned it. And people said, fuck you, I don't care about your chair and I don't care about your feelings. Where someone else might say, oh my gosh, let me get the lint roller for you. I'm sorry about that. You get what we mean, though. That might have been a bad example. But, I mean, you could really use any example. Yeah, I put regular butter in the whole thing of mashed potatoes. Well, it's already mixed and you can't do anything about it, so you either have to eat them that way or don't eat the mashed potatoes. I forgot to set some aside for you. You see how there can be a mutual agreement, or someone can continue to be upset and say, no, you hate me and you did it on purpose. What's the takeaway? Make your own fucking mashed potatoes if you're gonna have a problem with any of that stuff. If you're so concerned about that kind of stuff, you make your own. That's what I do. Yeah, I mean, why put that kind of responsibility on anyone else? Oh, I know. Sometimes they like to take it upon themselves and use you as some kind of piñata and over-exaggerate things. Yeah, I know. We've dealt with those kind of people quite a bit in our lifetime. It's a mental illness and a sickness, and you can't force them to get help or medicate for those things. They have very childish beliefs, too, sometimes when it comes to basic human functioning, how to treat bacterial overloads, how to prevent. Yeah, I mean, the oblivious, too. People actually being oblivious to a lot of these concerns and continuing to promote dangerous things like psychotic, mentally ill, pill-popping, alcoholic pieces of shit is absolutely scary and traumatizing to a lot of people, and it has been for many years. We've seen a lot of innocent people targeted. Yeah, in 2009, there were some really good doctors that were talking about the hepatitis B shot and the vitamin K shot they wanted to start rolling out, which they did. Yeah, and it was also around that time people were raising concerns about the pathogens and dangerous viruses people were getting from the Botox injections. And some of those same fucking people are part of the networks and punks that make money off of a lot of the sicko punk hazing and tating chicken fuckers. I mean, a lot of really dumb, gross stuff over the years that have brought a lot of disease and illness and suffering onto people that have to be in the same environment as those sick fucks. So, I mean, we do the best we can. It can be frustrating when people all throughout our system, state departments, mainstream news, play along. I think they got lost. I think they got fucking lost back 2009 and 10 and got all caught up with doing little G.I. Joe investigations and getting the cartel families and the non-vaxxers and teaching people lessons. Yeah, you people are really fucking sick. You need help. The decisions that were made were absolutely detrimental. That's already been proven and done, and we're still dealing with it, and people are still promoting the dangerous things, so I'm not sure. Hopefully people continue to speak out. There are people speaking out about a lot of different things that are fucked up within the systems and being ignored, and it is sad. Innocent children and adults that get abused, ignored, and have to fight ruthlessly, sometimes being arrested for disorderlies, for being too loud, and psychotic fucking pieces of shit in those communities committing fraud and helping the punks teach people a lesson, feeling threatened by their anger. Fuck you. Yeah, people need to grow the fuck up, you know? Yeah, we sure hope so. We sure hope so. Anyways, after Norwood had made his way out of the wilderness, where he had suffered remarkable privations, he journeyed not from town to town, but from plantation to plantation, enjoying the free hospitality of the planters and living upon the fat of the land. That's where we ended off. And some 75 years later, William Byrd, in his travel journeys, gives much the same impression. In Puritan New England, however, the people were commonly gathered into towns, with the meeting houses as the community centers. When a town grew until there was a scarcity of land in the immediate neighborhood, a body of persons capable of organizing a new church was gathered and led off into the edge of the wilderness to found a new town. Johnson's The Wonder-Working Providence of Sions-Savier in New England is largely a record of the forming of new communities of this sort, and perhaps one can get no better notion of what the process was like than to be had from his detailed account on the founding of his hometown of Woburn. It's in Massachusetts, yeah? Well, is it? Woburn? It might, or is it another one in Virginia? Oh, okay. Oh, that's Woven. Woven, Massachusetts. Sions-Savior, Sions, Savior. Always there was a movement toward the frontier, and somewhat isolated groups in both North and South soon exhibited marked peculiarities that attracted the attention of such travelers as Sarah Kemble Knight and the William Byrd, both of whom wrote early in the 18th century. Along the road between Boston and New York, Madame Knight found rich opportunities for the observation of uncouth manners, and she eased her mind by writing in her diary, employing rhyme when her feelings were too tense for prose. Here is a characteristic entry in which she pays her respects to a miserable rural inn, alludes to the difficulties she encounters on precarious roads, and describes some of the poverty-stricken people she meets. However, I thought it proper to warn poor travelers to endeavor to avoid falling into circumstances like ours, which at our next stage I sat down and did as followeth. May all that dread the cruel fiend of night keep on, and not at this Kurt's mansion light. 'Tis hell, and devils here do dwell. Here dwells the devil, surely, this hell. Nothing but wants a drop to cool your tongue. Can't be procured these cruel fiends among. Plenty of horrid grins and looks severe, hunger and thirst, but pity's banished here. The right hand keep, if hell on earth you fear. Thus, leaving this habitation of cruelty, we went forward, and arriving at an ordinary about 2 miles further, found tolerable accommodation, but our hostess, being a pretty full-mouthed old creature, entertained our fellow traveler, the French doctor, with innumerable complaints of her bodily infirmities, and whispered to him so loud that all the house had as full a hearing as he, which was very derivating to the company, of which there was a great many, and one might see by their sneering, But poor weary, I split out to enter my mind in my journal, and left my great landlady with her talkative guests to themselves. From hence we proceeded about 10 toward noon through the Narragansett country, pretty leisurely, and about 1 afternoon come
to Puckatawg River, which was about 200 paces over and now very high, and no way over to the other side but this. I dared not venture to ride, though, my courage at best in such cases but small, and now at the lowest ebb my reason and my weary, hungry, and uneasy circumstances. So taking leave of my company, thou, with no little reluctance, that I could not proceed with them on my journey, stop at the little cottage just by the river, to wait the waters falling, which the old man that lived there said would be in a little time, and he would conduct me safe over. This little hut was one of the wretchedest I ever saw a habitation for human creatures. It was supported with shores enclosed with clapboards laid on lengthways, and so much asunder that the light come now everywhere, the door tied on with a cord in the place of hinges, the floor the bare earth, no windows such as the thin covering afforded, nor any furniture but a bed with a glass bottle hanging at the head on, and earthen cup, a small pewter basin, a board with sticks to stand on instead of a table, and a block or two in the corner instead of chairs. The family were the old man, his wife, and 2 children, and all and every part being the picture of poverty, notwithstanding both the hut and its inhabitants were very clean and tied to the crossing the old proverb that bare walls make giddy housewives. I bless myself that I was not one of this miserable crew, and impressions their wickedness formed in me caused me on the very spot to say, though all at ease, a stranger and alone, all my fatigues shall not extort a groan. These indignants have hunger with their ease, their best is woe's behalf than my disease. Their miserable hut which heat and cold alternately without repulse do hold, their lodgings thin and hard, their Indian fare, the mean apparel which the wretches wear, and their 10,000 ills which can't be told, makes nature ever 'tis middle-aged look old. When I reflect, my late fatigues do seem only a notion or forgotten dream. The history of the dividing line, William Byrd's famous travel journey, supplies an equally racy contemporary on the life of the struggling white settlers and the miserable Indians who dwelt along the border of Virginia and North Carolina. There are abundant passages similar to this one. Surely there is no place in the world where the inhabitants live with less labor than in North Carolina. It approaches nearer to the description of Lubberland than any other, by the great facility of the climate, the easiness of raising provisions, and the slothfulness of the people. Indian corn is of so great increase that a little pains will subsist a very large family with bread, and then they may have meat without any pains at all, by the help of the low grounds and the great variety of mast that grows on the high land. The men, for their parts, just like the Indians, impose all the work upon the poor women. They make their wives rise out of bed early in the morning, and at the same time they lie and snore till the sun has run 1/3 of his course, and dispersed all the unwholesome damps. Then, after stretching and yawning for half an hour, they light their pipes, and under the protection of a cloud of smoke venture out into their open air. Though if it happens to be never so little cold, they quickly return shivering into the chimney corner. When the weather is mild, they stand leaning with both arms upon the cornfield fence, and gravely consider whether they had best go and take a small heat at the how, but generally find reasons to put it off till another time. Thus they loiter away their lives like Solomon's sluggard, with their arms across, and at the winding up of the year scarcely have bread to eat. To speak the truth, 'tis a thorough aversion to labor that makes people file off to North Carolina, where plenty and where plenty and a warm sun confirm them in their disposition to laziness for their whole lives. From the beginning of the 18th century, satirical accounts of life on the raw frontiers became fairly common in America, but perhaps none is more vigorous or more abusive in tone than The Saltweed Factor, 1708, a set of verses depicting the many unattractive features of life in the merry land of that day. The Saltweed Factor, saltweed, compound word, SOT-WEED, the Saltweed Factor, yeah. The author who finds the saltweed or tobacco planters a desirable race thinks Maryland was probably the country to which Cain fled after the murder of Abel. He is contemptuous of the 1,001 crudities to be found in this colony. He experiments, for example, with an Indian canoe and describes it thus. The Indians call this watery wagon canoe a vessel none can brag on, cut from a popular tree or pine and fashioned like a through for swine. In this most noble fishing boat I boldly put myself afloat. During the most part of his sojourn in Maryland, he was harassed in mind and uncomfortable in body. While he was a guest at a planter's home, his rest was disturbed at midnight by barnyard noises which invaded his room. Raging, I jumped upon the floor, and like a drunken sailor swore. With sword I fiercely laid about, and soon dispersed a feathered rout. He took to the orchard for the remainder of the night, but there his ears was assailed by still harsher sounds. Hoarse, croaking frauds did about me ring, such peals the dead to life would bring. A rattlesnake pleasantly drove him to take refuge in a tree, where, however, he was at the mercy of the mosquitoes. Morning came as a release, and he hastened back to the planter's house to breakfast on broiled bear's meat. Later adventures in a court town and his experiences after he set up in businesses has a factor revealed to him the barbarous quality of almost every type of Maryland settler. If, however, he has been conjectured, the author of The Saltweed Factor was also the author of Saltweed Redivivus, Redivivus. But some 20 years later, he had in the meantime become more interested in Maryland's prospects and less bitter about the crudelty of frontier civilization. Colonial writings had early begun to show signs of those sectional prejudices and jealousies that have ever since, but in varying degree, influenced American literature. Not only were there considerable differences in the character of the people of the various colonies, but their economic interests were then, as always, widely divergent. There can be, declared Hugh Jones, in The Present State of Virginia, written in 1724, no room for real apprehension of danger of a revolt of the plantations in future ages. Or if any of them should attempt it, they might very easily be reduced by the others, for all of them will never unite with another, for they strenuously pursue their separate interests. National prejudice, too, was strong, especially in the northern colonies where Dutch and English and French and English came into contact. Long before New Netherland became New York, the Dutch in that colony were thoroughly alarmed at the encroachments of their neighbors to the eastward. New York used to be called New Netherland. Very cool. In Neverland, Peter Stendham, in The Complaint of New Amsterdam, not only laments the depredations of the Indians, but voices the young colony's plea for help against the English. For the swine trampled down the crops of mine, uproot too my choicest land, Still and dumb the while I stand, in the hope my mother's arm will protect me from the harm. No doubt the deep-rooted antipathy of the old New Yorkers for New England, still plainly to be seen in even such 19th century writers as Cooper, was partly the result of this Dutch resentment of Yankee encroachment. The New Englanders themselves looked with fear and trembling toward the Canadian frontier and hated the French with a religious fervor. Sewell naively records, hey, that's the name of the street right here on the corner. Spelt the same too. Is it Sewall? I remember one time I was standing down on the side porch here, and this woman was walking by, and she goes, do you know where Sewell Street is? I was like, no, but Seawall Street is right there. She just looked at me funny and kept walking. Anyways, Sewell naively records that the terrible men of the North bothered even in his dreams. Part of the hatred was, of course, a result of that Puritan distrust of the Catholic, which is excellently illustrated in such writers as John Giles and John Williams, who were carried into Canada by the Indians. Williams was a minister who spent his captivity in horror of the attempts of the priest to convert him. Giles, who had been brought up as a strict Protestant, was, as he tells us in his memoirs of odd adventures, astonished at the kindness of a Jesuit priest. Out of sympathy for the prisoner, the priest gave him a biscuit, but the young Protestant was too fearful of Jesuit treachery to eat it. He gave me a biscuit, which I put into my pocket, and not daring to eat it, buried it under a log, fearing he had put something in it to make me love him. Being very young and having heard much of the Papists touring the Protestants caused me to act thus. I hated the sight of a Jesuit. When Protestants caused me to act thus, I hated this. When my mother heard the talk of my being sold to a Jesuit, she said to me, "Oh, my dear child, if it were God's will, I had rather follow you to your grave." The conflict of racial elements also left its mark early on American literature. As a social problem, the Negro soon surpassed the Indian in importance. Even in the 17th century, protests against slavery began to be heard, and in New England, where economic conditions made slavery generally unprofitable, the 18th century saw a growing opposition voiced by many writers of the time. Perhaps the first important publication devoted to a protest against American slavery was Samuel Sewall's pamphlet of 1700, The Selling of Joseph, addressed principally to the Pope of Massachusetts. He begins with a consideration of mere expediency. The numerousness of slaves at this day in the province, of the uneasiness of them under their slavery, hath put many upon thinking whether the foundations of it be firmly and well laid, has to sustain the vast weight that is built upon it. And arguments of expediency form indeed a considerable part of his pamphlet, but Sewall also attempts an appeal of the kind later so familiar, on the grounds of religious and moral duty. He cites the scriptures to show that all men and sons of Adam, originally and naturally, he declares, there is no such thing as slavery. As for the Old English, stock itself is undoubtedly declined during the first generations of hard pioneer life, with its too meager intellectual stimulus. Yet the writers of the time leave a pleasant record of the active interest of the colonists, particularly in New England, in establishing schools and even colleges. Both Harvard in Massachusetts and William and Mary in Virginia were the subjects of many pens. The life of the colonial home is recorded somewhat minutely of times, often in a very matter-of-fact manner, in the diaries and journals of the time, of which the best known today is Samuel Sewall's, covering more than half a century of the life of a man who not only knew well the leading persons of his colony, but who was the head of a family large enough to necessitate a good deal of attention from the diarist to domestic concerns. D-I-A-R-I-S-T, diarist to domestic concerns. Like a good diarist, Sewell is not reticent about confiding trivial personal matters to his paper. I was threatened with my sore throat, he writes, but I went to bed early at Miss Sparks' pinned my stocking about my neck, drunk a pioneer of sage tea, upon which I sweat very kindly. I know, it's interesting, someone saying like Darius and these connections with different Catholic, associations and beliefs, and they're talking literally about, Cain and Adam and his brother being murdered and traveling to different lands. I mean, when you actually start to read the stories, and it's quite incredible and fun to learn about. It eliminates a lot of hatred, which I think that's why they don't like people to learn about it, because it turns into this, they're trying to say slavery didn't exist, and don't let the white man fool you. You're oppressed. Get some funding. I mean, this has gone on for decades, and it gets really fucking sickening to a lot of us. But yeah, it's interesting too, and those people being associated dairyist to the dairy farms and eating swine and pig, and some people not wanting to be part of that, knowing it was making them sick. And here he has his sore throat. He's drinking his sage tea. Oh, it's interesting. We're not saying, eat your goddamn bacon if you want to, drink your milk. We're not fucking saying that. It's interesting stuff to learn about in the bacterial infections, and that a lot of people still to this day come off their very dangerous psoriasis and eczema medications and shots that often cause more problems later on down the line. Yeah, they find that eating less dairy and pork actually helps eliminate a lot of those things. And when you look into the history, it's not that hard to figure out. It's okay. There's nothing sadistic about it, really. I mean, you can take it to Sadie if you want. But just grow the fuck up. It's not that hard to figure out. Over the years, the bacterial infections caused by eating raw pork or pork that was stored or cooked improperly, which probably would have been common back then, before they had refrigerators and that knowledge. I know, when you go back through the years, you'll see that's why they probably were pairing it. They were learning about how to combat the bacterial infections. He was drinking sage tea, some like sauerkraut, and using fermented foods. Yeah, I mean, you can buy expensive things like kimchi and stuff like that. I get the apple cider vinegar and take a shot every once in a while. Especially if you're trying to lose weight. It's a good, a lot of people use that if you're going to eat a heavy meal, a meal that's heavy in fat. Meat, gristle, whatever. Yeah, about 15 minutes before you eat. You want to take a shot of that vinegar. You should dilute it. A little bit of water, aloe, some like lemon. Yeah, they have different concoctions I see over the years. It's cool, people making that stuff. Yeah, about 15-20 minutes before you eat, if you take a shot of that. Yeah, it's been proven it helps to break down some of the fats and stuff like that. Yeah, so a lot of people use it for different reasons. It's great. It's an antimicrobial. It helps to balance out. It's like a probiotic, yeah? Balance out those bacterias. Good things to learn about. I know, we've been shocked and amazed at how many years so many people ignore this and carry on as they do. I don't know. Fucking amazing. Really fucking amazing. Anyways, yeah, about my neck, drunk pioneer, sage tea, upon which I sweat very kindly. Again, he tells us how on Sunday he tried to lead the singing in church, but gave it up after 2 miserable attempts. The members of his family moved through his pages to the accompaniment, usually a very laconic comment. Ooh, what a great word. Am I saying it right? Laconic? Laconic. Very laconic comment. But it would be difficult to gauge the depth of feeling that actually gripped the stern old Puritan as he made these entries. In like manner, much parental feeling may have been suppressed when John Winthrop, a town nearby. I lived in the town of Winthrop for a little bit. May have been suppressed when John Winthrop recorded in his journal, July 2nd, 1630, my son, Henry Winthrop, was drowned at Salem, though their mere entry betrays his little sentiment on his note, that the wolves killed some swine at Saugus, and that a cow died at Plymouth, and a goat at Boston, with eating Indian corn. With that, the Puritan records prove beyond a doubt, however, is the stoical resignation of the religious devout in the face of what he considered the will of God. Thus, John Cotton wrote of the deaths of his 2 children, Christ gave them both, and he takes them both again to live with him. Blessed be his holy name. The stricter type of Puritan mind was not easily lured from serious concerns to such purely worldly manners as amusements, and holidays in the Puritan colonies were likely to be holy days. Festivals like Christmas, too much savoring of Baptist mummery, were hardly to be celebrated at all. Bradford set down in his journal with grim humor the rebuke he administered to some newcomers at Plymouth who thought to make Christmas a day of rest and recreation. But far greater was this old Puritan wrath when he found that his ungodly neighbors of Merry Mount had set up the English abomination of the Maypole and were dancing and singing about it. Thomas Morton, leader of this giddy crew, had, says Bradford in his journal, written verses for the occasion, and Morton himself records in his New English Canon that the following joyous stanzas were sung by the revelers. Drink and be merry, merry, merry boys, let all your delight in the Hime's joys. Ho to him, now the day is come, about the merry Maypole, take a room. Make green garlands, bring bottles out, and fill sweet nectar freely about. Uncover thy head and fear no harm, for her's good liquor to keep it warm. Then drink and be merry, and lo to Hymen. Nectar is a thing assigned by the deity's own mind to cure that heart oppressed with grief, and of good liquors is the chief. Then drink, and lo to Hymen, give to the melancholy man a cup or 2 of now and then. Thy plastic will soon revive his blood, and make him be of a merrier mood. Then drink, and lo to Hymen, give to the nymph that frees from scorn. No Irish stuff nor Scotch overworn. Lasses and beaver coats come away. Ye shall be welcome to us night and day, to drink and be merry, ho to Hymen. And it is Morton, too, from whom we have the comical but somewhat ponderous account of the heroic deeds of Captain Shrimp, as he dubbed Miles Standish, the little commander of the Plymouth militia that came out against Merry Mount. Long after the Maypole of Merry Mount had been laid low, however, the same heathen abomination raised its head again in a New England Puritan community at Charleston, as at Merry Mount the hated symbol was cut down. But Edmund Andros, no friend to Puritan prejudices, was governor, and soon a new and bigger Maypole with a garland atop rose in the place of the old one. Phipps, who was accused of inciting the destruction of the first pole, was, says Sewell, bound to answer next December, the governor having sent for him before him yesterday, May 26, 1687. Some 2 years earlier, before Andros arrived, the moral dignity of the colony had been more successfully preserved, as Sewell's account proves. After the ministers of this town come to the court and complain against a dancing master who seeks to set up here and half-mixed dances, and his time of meeting is lecture day, and 'tis reported he should say that by one play he could teach more divinity than Mr. Willard or the Old Testament. Mr. Moody said 'twas not a time for New England to dance. Mr. Mather struck at the root, speaking against mixed dances. Later entries show that the unfortunate dancing master was first ordered to desist from his evil practices and then fine 110 down, the rest respited till the last March. That so might go away if he would. Soon afterwards, increased Mather, in the name of the ministers of Boston, published a sermon against profane and promiscuous dancing. In Virginia, on the other hand, amusements were common that would have seemed quite beyond the pale of decency in Puritan New England. Horse racing and hunting were favorite sports. The jovial entertainment of guests on the plantations had likewise not very exact counterpart among the Puritans, who, however, were by no means ignorant of the virtues of strong drink. It was naturally the colonies outside of New England that the American theater had its first beginnings. Even the readings of book was often a duty among the Puritans, while equally often a pleasant pastime among other colonies, especially those of Virginia. The cultivated Puritans were keen readers of sermons and theological disputations, while men of equal culture attainments in Virginia were more likely to prefer such light fare as the Beggar's Opera, the reading of which Bird records afforded the entertainment at a plantation home which he visited on his travels. But the New Englanders were by no means ignorant of all such books, and they often exhibited a goodly knowledge of the ancient classics in particular. Sewell records how pleasantly he and his friend could spend an evening reading Latin to each other. In dress, the Puritans were generally more austere than their neighbors to the south, though even in New England, persons of rank and wealth sometimes display the taste of the time for colorful and expensive apparel. One of the serious points of difference between John Cotton and Roger Williams was a question regarding the duty of women to wear veils. Nathaniel Ward, in a famous passage, The Simple Cobbler, written in 1647, spoke scornfully of the women of both New England and Old England, who seemed to him to be culpably fond of female finery. To speak moderately, I truly confess it is beyond the ken of my understanding to conceive how those women should have any true grace or valuable virtue that have so little wit has to disfigure themselves with such exotic garbs, and not only dismantles their native lovely luster, but transflores them into Gantbar geese, ill-shapen Shotton's shellfish, Egyptian hieroglyphics, or at the best into French flirts of the pastry, which a proper English woman should scorn with her heels. It is no marvel they wear drails on the hinder part of their heads, having nothing, as it seems, the forepart, but a few squirrels' brains to help them frisk from one ill-favored fashion to another. These whim-crowned sheaves, these fashion-fancying wits, are empty, thin-brained shells and fiddling nits. The very troublers and impoverishers of mankind, I can hardly forbear to command the world a saying of a lady living sometime with the Queen of Bohemia. I know not where she found it, but it is a pity it should be lost. The world is full of care, much like onto a bubble. Women and care and women and care and trouble. A few more paragraphs in this section. The verses are even enough for such odd pegmas, P-E-G-M-A, pegmas. The verses are even enough for such odd pegmas. I can make myself sick at any time with comparing the dazzling splendor wherewith our gentle women were embellished in some former habits, with the gut-foundered goosedom wherewith they are now surcingled and debauched. Surcingled? Like S-U-R-C-I-N-G-L-E-D. Look that one up. Surcingled are now surcingled and debauched. We have about 5 or 6 of them in our colony. If I see any of them accidentally, I cannot cleanse my fancy, P-H-A-N-S-I-E, I cannot cleanse my fancy of them for a month after. I have been a solitary widower almost 12 years, purpose lately to make a step over to my native country for a yoke fellow. But when I consider how women there have tripwifed themselves with their cladments, I have no heart to the voyage, lest their nauseous shapes and the sea should work too surely upon my stomach. I speak sadly, methinks, it should break the hearts of Englishmen to see so many godly English women imprisoned in French cages, peering out of their hood holes for some men of mercy to help them with a little wit, and nobody relieves them. Many other details of private life received, of course, the most anxious attention of the Puritan moralists and lawmakers. There were, however, even among the Puritans themselves, who had their moments of doubt regarding the ultimate effect of an extremely repressive moral code made legally binding up the whole community. Nothing in Bradford's journal is more interesting than his brooding over the moral decline of the miniature Puritan Israel of Plymouth, for such a decline seemed to him to be evident in spite of the united efforts of church and state. Marvelous it may be to see and consider how some kind of wickedness did grow and break forth here, in a land where the same was so much witnessed against and so narrowly looked on to, and severely punished when it was known, has in no place more or so much that I have known or heard of, insomuch as they have been somewhat censured, even by moderate of good men, for their severity in punishments. And yet all this could not suppress the breaking out of sundry notorious sins, as this year, besides others, gives us too many sad precedents and instances, especially drunkenness and uncleanness, not only incontinence between persons unmarried, for which many both men and women have been punished sharply enough, but some married persons also. But which is worse, even sodomy and burglary, things fearful to name, have broke forth in this land oftener than once. I say it may justly be marveled at, and cause us to fear and tremble at the consideration of our corrupt natures, which are so hardly bridled, subdued, and mortified, nay, cannot by any other means but the powerful work and grace of God's Spirit. But besides this, one reason may be that the devil, D-I-V-E-L-L, that the devil may carry a greater spite against the churches of Christ and the gospel here. By now, much more they endear, I-N-D-E-A-O-U-R, to preserve holiness, to appear right amongst them, and strictly punish the country when it ariseth, either in church or cometh wealth, that he might cast a blemish, and stain upon them in the eyes of the world, who used to be rash in judgment. I would rather think thus, than that Satan hath more power in these heathen lands, as some have thought, than in more Christian nations, especially over God's servants in them. Another reason may be that it may be in this case as it is with waters, when their streams are stopped or dammed up. When they get passage, they flow with more violence, and make more noise and disturbance, than when they are suffered to ruin quietly in their own channels. So wickedness being here more stopped by strict laws, and the same more nearly looked on to, so as it could not run in a common road of liberty, as it would, as is inclined, it searches everywhere, and at last breaks out where it gets vent. A third reason may be, here, as I am verily persuaded, is not more evils in this kind, nor nothing near so many by proportion as in other places, but they are here more discovered and seen, and made public by due search, inquisition, and due punishment, for the churches look narrowly to their inquisition, for the churches look narrowly to their members, and the magistrates over all, more strictly than in other places. Besides, here the people are but few in comparison to other places, which are full of populace and lie hid, as it were, in a wood or thicket, and many horrible evils by that means are never seen nor known, whereas here they are, as it were, brought into the light and set to the plain field, or rather on a hill, made conspicuous to the view of all. And that's the end of section 5. We'll do section 6 later. Welcome. Yes, thank you. Chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
Until May of 2028. Call 1-800-932-9292.